I'm Kelsey Litchfield, and this is the Field Advisor Podcast, where I talk with local experts to unpack the latest agronomy information and research, giving you the knowledge to make informed decisions out in the field. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Field Advisor Podcast. We have a returning guest today, Matt Reardon with Nutrien Ag Solutions. Matt, I'm pretty sure you're probably tired of hearing people say it, but they said if it rains on Easter, it'll rain the next 7 Sundays. I don't know if that's true. I know you're going to put a scientific spin on it, but what do you say? Are we in for a wet late April into May?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because it has come up quite a few times. Now, I'll say this much. I enjoy kind of the old wives' tales, if you will, for lack of a better word, around the weather. I think all of them have a kernel of truth to them, even if, maybe we struggle to piece the meteorological or physical significance of them together. I've enjoyed this one. I've only really heard it quite a bit this year, and I think there's a reason for that. This year, we've had quite a bit of rain that happened on Easter weekend, and I actually went back and looked for some previous years, and we didn't have nearly as much as we just had come through, at least Illinois and some other parts here this weekend. And then when I think back to some recent years, we dealt with a little bit of dryness creeping in May. So maybe there is some truth to it. I cannot tie an obvious meteorological connection to it, why there'd be this, exact weekly cadence to it. I think at least in Illinois and across the Midwest, I can say this, that between the end of April and the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks after that through May and early June, that is climatologically our wettest time of the year in a given calendar year. So pretty good chances than not that in a given weekend you're going to see some rain moving through, and that might be a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy there. But we'll see. We'll have to check this year, and I'll take the precip chances if they're going to keep coming every weekend.
We'll see. I mean, that's the golden phrase. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yep.
Your last blog, you said historically late April, May are the peak of severe weather season. So on top of that rain, we're still seeing some severe weather. We had severe weather on Easter night, Sunday evening, and I thought it was so weird. I've seen tornado reports, rain, but not a lot of thunder and lightning. I thought someone said they heard thunder, but my dog usually runs and hides when there's thunder, and she was not going anywhere. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, your dog and mine are pretty similar. So I have two ways to know the thunder's coming. I have a dog in my lap, and then usually I hear the thunder shortly after that because his hearing's better than mine. Yeah, we've kind of noticed with a few of these severe setups in April, and I think this is a good thing, that we've struggled to get that kind of rich, deep tropical moisture up into parts of Illinois, parts of Missouri, even Indiana this year. Obviously, we had the severe events of late March and early April, April 2nd, the tornado outbreak that came through portions of Indianapolis and through Illinois, certainly. But after that, we just haven't had these strong surges of moisture. So we have storms, we've had rain events to talk about, but it hasn't been this kind of prolific thunder or these electric events. I think those are still to come. We're seeing the Gulf warm up. It's actually quite a bit warmer than usual, even now here in late April. And usually with that, warmer, moisture air masses start moving north. And I think we'll have better thunder chances going through the year.
Yeah. Severe weather season is not done yet. And I know many planters are out there. Maybe they've taken a brief break from the rain, but looking now into spring and summer, I'll share this real quick. The Climate Prediction Center came up with their, do you call it summer forecasts? Is that how you?
Outlook.
Seasonal temperature outlook. Talk to us. What's this looking like?
Yeah, so this has been making the rounds. So there's the seasonal outlook comes out from the Climate Prediction Center. They usually put out kind of the middle to end of the month. This one that we're showing here is the May, June, and July outlook. So we can call this one maybe the early half or the early 2/3 of the growing season. The one that's gotten a bit more traction is the forecast that they put out for June, July, August. Yeah, so this is the one. It takes a while to get to, but people find it because you're looking at a map that has a lot of beige on it. That tends to mean below average in terms of precipitation from the Climate Prediction Center. And I've seen a lot from people commenting on this. They're saying, $20 beans, $10 corn, what have you. I think it's important to look at the map and read it, right? We see the pretty colors sometimes. We see beige, that means drought, right? Our brains just immediately go to that. We see the green colors over there in the Carolinas and the coastal plain. We think flooding, but if you actually look at the contours on the right, the legend that's at the bottom of this map, right? Let's go back to middle school, map and legend reading. It's really only saying that the probability of being below normal in that darkest contour in Minnesota, the Northern Plains, the upper Midwest, is about 40 to 50% chance of just being below normal on precip. And I'd make the argument that in portions of western Iowa, southwestern Minnesota, even the western Corn Belt of the eastern Dakotas, eastern Nebraska, you can still grow a really good corn crop with below normal precip,
Yeah.
right? Especially if we get it
Right.
during pollination. Even if we're a little bit warmer and drier in June, we put down a good rootstock, we get some GDDs in, and then you get rain on that crop later in July. I could argue you could grow a better corn crop doing that, right, than getting too much rain in June or too much rain in August when we're drying down. So this isn't even by itself, disaster of a forecast. But what it does do critically is it raises the risk, right? So in a given growing season going into it, just looking at all historical years combined, let's say the last 30 to 40, a big kind of yield robbing drought summer happens roughly one in every 10 to 12 years. I think 2012, 88, pockets in there, elsewhere 02, 06 regionally. Mm-hmm. We had regional drought last year in 24 and the Eastern Corn Belt, areas of Ohio. So any given year, I typically go with that kind of 10 to 15% chance. This year it's raised a bit. So I might go in this year saying 30 or 40% chance of a more significant yield robbing drought. Does that mean you're going to go change every decision you make, go alter your entire plan? I don't think so, but it does, I think, keeps more of a focus on flexibility this year, right? Going into this year, knowing that we have this greater risk. Now, you'll also notice it's not necessarily over Illinois. Only the far western counties are in that first contour below normal.
I'm in that spot.
Right. And so it is there. There is that risk. And there's also the soil moisture deficits that we'll have to talk about as well that are kind of lingering in northern Illinois.
Yeah, let's talk about that because, planters have been rolling. They say plant in the dust. What is it? Your bin will bust.
Yes. Yeah.
Something like that. I should know that. Don't come after me for not knowing that off the top of my head. And we, as you said earlier, we're getting some rains, but are they really doing anything to that subsoil moisture? I keep hearing people say, oh, drought's really not a concern. You look at the current drought monitor here. So this was last Thursday's. Just looking at Illinois, I think it's getting better. But there's still some worry, wouldn't you say? Like, don't think we're not out of the woods yet, kind of thing.
Yeah, so we've been, with the recent rains that we've had in spring, we've been improving those drought classifications slowly, just generally across Illinois and the Central Corn Belt. However, when we add them up, at least year to date, and if I do this for areas along I-72 all the way up toward Morris, Illinois, even some areas in the western counties, we're still finding deficits. We're typically a bit higher in terms of our rain totals for the given year to date and an average year. And all that means is that we haven't quite recovered from really an overwinter drought, which picked up last fall. We talked about this last month where we were very dry last fall. If you pull up the drought monitor and we take that back to late October, you're going to see a lot more reds and oranges and pretty colors across the Midwest because we were so dry. We overwintered some of that drought in the subsoil. That's lingering really I-74 north all the way up toward kind of the state line of Wisconsin. And the recent rains have improved that, but we're still seeing deficits in soil moisture. We're seeing deficits in rainfall. And until we get, a good soaking rain, not this one Easter weekend on, then the whole week off and the next weekend on, I think we're going to linger that into the summer months. And again, that's one of the reasons that there is this drought conversation. That drought forecast that you see from the Climate Prediction Center, they're not just going into, a magic bag and pulling out, a random forecast. They're looking at that soil moisture. That goes into it. So it's not coming out of thin air, right? They're looking at the soil moisture. They're looking at what's happening in the Pacific Ocean in terms of sea surface temperatures, and only a few other things really go into that forecast.
When you think of rain, you said, we need a soaking rain to help this. Do those happen very often? It feels like it doesn't anymore. We all have pretty short-term memories. Obviously, we don't calculate how much rain we're getting, or we do on the day of, but we don't think about it long-term. We can't predict the future, but do you think it's going to be at least a little bit possible, hopeful, like the way that the forecasts are looking that we could get a soaking rain? I know that's trying to predict the future, but I'm just trying to get a good cusp on it.
Yeah, no, we're in the business of trying to make sense of what's happening in the forecast and where this thing is going. I think part of the issue you talk about, we've had these rains. We see that in the data. There's been these rain events over the last kind of 3 to 4 weeks, but I think Easter weekend was a really good example. Now, I'll admit, going into the weekend, I thought we had a good chance across kind of the I-55, 39 corridor through the middle part of the state, over even toward Indiana, of clearing an inch up to an inch and a half maybe of rain because we just had so many storm chances this weekend. Well, what did we see through the weekend? During the day, we didn't get as much of the rain and storms. And when they came over the night, they weren't as electric and vigorous as we thought they would be. So we ended up looking at weekend totals, unless you're kind of in the southwest corner of the state there, where they did reach some of those higher levels.
Yes,
We were
I was
down
going to
below
mention.
an inch.
I was
Right, in
going
a
to
lot of
mention
areas.
Southern Illinois. They're like, no more rain, please, in some
Right.
areas. I mean, I think I saw someone said Gallatin County got 15 inches. So
Yeah.
they're good.
Yeah, they have plenty there, but you start heading north, and central and northern Illinois maybe got up near an inch. So we missed out on, I think, another half inch to another 3/4 inch of rain this weekend. That, again, our brains just say, well, it rained. But then when you start adding up these totals at the end of the year, we start missing on some of the higher end events here of these quote unquote soaking rains. And it starts showing up in the data as a 3 to 4 inch rainfall deficit.
So I want to just quickly summarize that forecast for the summer from the Climate Prediction Center. What are the key takeaways farmers need to know, just to be aware of as we're heading towards that season?
Yeah, I would stay flexible. I have the privilege of trying to predict the weather and not the markets, and I'll enjoy that privilege here. But I would stay flexible this year. I would say the central story there is, in a given year, if you don't show me any weather, you just say it's March of 2025, I'll give you the chance of a yield-robbing drought in Illinois at around 10%. It's hard to buy a drought in this state. We know that. We've had some of these, quote-unquote flash droughts in the past, but we've had rain. It's come at the right time. I'm thinking like 2023, even 2022 a little bit, where we've had rain at the right time in July, and we grew a pretty darn good crop in those years. This year, I'm not at 10%. I'm closer to 30 to 40% in the state of Illinois. And if you actually read what I'm saying there, I'm not forecasting a drought. In fact, 60% chance that we have a decent year here. That's a lot lower than it usually is. So keep that in the back of your head, that drought risk is higher this year in Illinois. And then I would expand that if we're not just thinking, right, as growers, we have to think about, right, the whole supply, right, not just our local area, of course. And then I would expand that risk really more to the whole Corn Belt, with the chance that we at least have one of these regional droughts that is starting to impact production levels at the end of the year. I would put that closer to 60%, right, in a given area across the wide production in the I states, not just Illinois. And if you kind of factor those two things in, all right, there's a bit more information to be gleaned here. We're seeing that from the Climate Prediction Center, their drought forecast that we just saw. They're on that, starting to raise those risks as well. Some of the other seasonal forecasts that we look at, either from the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast, and that's a mouthful, we just call it the European model, right? Their seasonal forecast for summer is similarly dry. There's another one, ridiculous acronym, NMME, which is the National Multi-Model Ensemble. They are dry, and the list goes on. So there's enough stars aligning that are raising that 10% risk, if you will, up to about 40% for me, for Illinois specifically.
So something I definitely keep an eye on. What does a short-term forecast look like for the next 2-ish weeks? What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I think folks are still getting the fields, right? The progress report that come out. We still have a long ways to go for corn, certainly. Beans are getting in the ground here. I think this week right now, through the end of the week, looking pretty warm. I think we're going to start drying out soils. I would expect to start seeing field work picking up here as we get to the middle to the end of the week. But we have this kind of stoppage on Friday where the rain chances really pick up at the end of this week. I think there's a lull on Saturday and Sunday with less rain chances across Illinois, but those pick up again early next week. So Monday and Tuesday, those could come with some severe weather. Right now, this system, similar to the ones we just talked about, also struggling a bit for moisture, pulling it up from the Gulf here in late April and early May. So it doesn't look like, a huge setup in terms of widespread tornado reports and severe wind events, but definitely something I'm keeping an eye on early next week. You'd imagine that's going to bring some precipitation through the state, potentially calm some of the field work down. But then later next week, we're peering into the crystal ball a little bit, getting out into early May. Things look a little bit quieter. Temperatures, I think, slightly on the warmer side, not seeing as many precipitation chances in early May. That's fine if it allows us to get the crop in the ground, right? Planting into dust, and we'll bust the bins later. But if that dryness lingers, good planting weather always concerns me a little bit, right? Because inherently, wide open windows, dry weather makes for, calm concerns in April and May. But if it lingers, right, you start getting into June, now we're talking about a different sort of problem. So we'll have to tackle that when we get to it. That's getting a little bit beyond in the forecast.
Speaking of wind events, I've been seeing so many social media headlines. This was one of the windiest years in 50 years, windiest March to April. So I know we talked about this beforehand, but it just proves that I'm not crazy, that it just seemed windier. But then you also said, I believe March and April are typically the windiest months of the year. So we're trying to see, is it an increasing trend, or are we just, in the windiest months? But social media, that's why I want to ask you. Social media says it's one of the windiest years in 50 years.
No, I love it. People are observant, right? And they want to share those. And we started hearing it kind of in early March that there was this ever-present wind, even outside of some of the thunderstorm events. So obviously underneath some of the thunderstorms, right, you're talking about higher winds and the warnings and the watches. But we've just seen, even during the calmer days, just this brisk wind, usually out of the west or the southwest this year. That was the case. We kind of tallied it up in March. NOAA finally came out and said that, at least as far as we've kept track of detailed wind records, again, going back about 50 years, that this past March was the windiest on record in the Midwest. So no, you're not going crazy. People are not going crazy. They're being very observant, which is fantastic. And we're noting that even despite March and April being a transitional season, windy systems coming through this year, we did it more. We've started to calm that down a bit. I think this week we'll notice a lull in the winds. Just this morning, again, if we're being observant, notice that pretty thick dew outside across portions of Illinois. It's hard to get dew on the ground like that with any sort of winds. That meant the winds were a little bit calmer than we expected here this morning. More dew on the ground. I think that theme of less wind finally is going to hold here through this week. That system that comes through Monday and Tuesday, I mentioned that severe weather chance. Kind of make the right guess that the winds are going to return in association with that, maybe gusts up to about 40, 45 miles an hour, even outside of the storms. But I think we get into a calmer pattern after that, and the winds come back down much less in early May than what we were looking at in early April for March.
I think we're ready for it. It seems like every day, the wind. It wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the wind, as the common Midwesterner is saying. Matt, anything else we didn't cover? I know when it talks about weather, I really like to talk about what's just happened. And maybe, I know sometimes you like to say it can be a crystal ball 2 weeks out. I like just to look at it kind of from a 50,000 point view to see what's going on, what farmers should be aware of. Is there anything else on your radar that, no pun intended.
Yeah. No, it's a good question.
That should be on farmers.
Yeah. So going into May, the biggest thing is, if we are, right, I painted this scenario of a 40% drought risk chance, right? That's significant. We're going to start watching for that. If that comes to fruition, right, we're going to start to see signs, signals of that in the long range, not terribly too far from now. So if we get into early May and that planting forecast is wide open and we start looking well out into the forecast, there's likely not going to be another big frost or freeze risk across the Midwest. So that's really our biggest focus right now. It's really only about 2 weeks away until our models will start getting out to the end of May and into June. If those are similarly dry, you can expect myself and others begin raising the stakes on that drought risk up from 40 to maybe 50% or beyond. And then we're talking about a more significant situation. Right, here comes the disclaimer as we try to peer into the crystal ball. Right, more spring rains. We're not done with spring quite yet. More severe storm chances. If we get more of those rains in here, we take away those soil moisture deficits, right? That 40% can come down, right? So we'll tackle those things as we get to it in May. Like we mentioned at the beginning, typically the peak of our severe weather season going into late April and then into May. So more of those storms we'll certainly have to talk about, even if it's a quiet year. There will be some, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
And I expect it to be busy and with more to discuss.
Yeah, more to discuss. That's why I like to have Matt on the podcast. Weather's always changing. We'll see where we are in a couple weeks. I know you can follow Matt on X, Twitter, whatever you call it. And then you can read his blogs. He writes us a monthly blog on Field Advisor as well. Matt, thanks so much. Anything else before we leave you?
Nope. Appreciate you having me on.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Field Advisor podcast. Unbiased, independent agronomy information to keep your farm moving forward. I'm Kelsey Litchfield, your voice from the field. This podcast is funded by the Illinois Soybean Association Checkoff Program. Stay connected with Field Advisor on social media. Follow, like, and share to keep the conversation going. And don't forget to subscribe to the Field Advisor podcast on your favorite podcast platform.